Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Flick Connection, where in less time than you typically spend looking for something to watch, I'm going to tell you about all the best stuff Prime Video is adding in July 2024. And I'm doing something very different in this video. Because Prime is adding so many brand new releases throughout the month, I'm actually going to talk about those first, and then at the end of the video, we'll come back and talk about all of the classic movies that they're adding right at the beginning of the month, because the list is so long, I had a hard time narrowing it down. Thanks to Keeps for sponsoring another video. We'll talk more about them later, but for now, let's talk about some new releases they're adding on July 2nd, including The Beekeeper. Now, I'll admit, this is not a movie I really liked. I thought it was actually pretty stupid, but I am a fan of Jason Statham, and the movie does have some badass moments in it, and it's got a really sharp look to it. I actually enjoyed quite a bit of the movie, even though I thought the setup and the plot and the world building they were going for was a pretty weak attempt at a John Wick type thing. But if you go into The Beekeeper expecting something kind of dumb, I think you could actually enjoy it quite a bit. On the same day, they add Evil Dead Rise, the latest Evil Dead movie. There's been 2 reboots so far, and they're kind of amazing. They're darker, much darker actually, than the original movies, yet they still somehow manage to feel connected to them. If you've never watched any Evil Dead movies, I'm not sure this is the one you want to start with. It's easily one of the darkest ones they've done, but like all Evil Dead movies, it's packed to the brim with practical effects. Yes, disgusting, horrific practical effects, but they look amazing, and these movies have little to no story. It's mostly just lore and kind of a fun house of horror, but again, Evil Dead Rise does a great job at being a new Evil Dead movie. On July 4th, they're adding a Prime Video original movie titled Space Cadet. This is definitely aimed at like a teenage girl audience, or at least a young woman audience. Scream Queen Emma Roberts actually stars in this. I rarely see her outside of horror movies, but she actually plays like a Florida party girl who gets selected to be in Space Cadet training. Does not sound like my type of thing, but could be a good, fairly wholesome family watch. It is rated PG-13, and there's quite a bit of drinking involved, but if you've got teenage girls in the house, this could be a great 4th of July watch.
I was on the subway the other day in New York. I accidentally made eye contact with a crazy person. That's a terrible moment. As a man, that is the closest you come to feeling like a woman in a bar.
And then on July 9th, Sam Morrill has a brand new stand-up special titled You've Changed. I like him a lot. And Prime Video does a great job of picking stand-up specials. They don't do nearly as many as Netflix, which tends to mean they're a little more selective, and Sam is a great selection. I'm looking forward to his new material. Speaking of funny, on July 11th, I can't believe they're actually adding this for several reasons, but there's a brand new Prime Video original series titled Sausage Party, Foodtopia. Yes, this is a spin-off of the animated movie Sausage Party, a movie that I did not think did very well. To my recollection, I thought it flopped and people thought it was pretty dumb and not enjoyable, but the new series is probably funny. This is adult animation, very crude humor, and there's not really any shows like it with this sort of like children's style animation, so I'm gonna have to check it out to see if it's worth watching. And then on the same day, Tyler Perry's latest movie, Divorce in the Black, gets released as a Prime Video original. And this is written and directed by Tyler Perry, and it's one of his more soap opera-y type things, but it also has some thriller vibes, and it's surprisingly long. It's nearly 2.5 hours, so Tyler Perry fans should be a pretty wild ride this month.
Aren't you glad to see me?
And then on the 18th, another Prime Video original movie appropriate for the family, My Spy, The Eternal City. This is the sequel to My Spy, the family-friendly spy movie starring Dave Bautista. I never watched the other one. My children are too young and I'm too old for it, but here comes the sequel on the 18th. And then on the 23rd, they're actually adding the new Bob Marley movie, One Love. It's worth noting that this movie was previously available on MGM Plus, a streaming service I know most people are not signed up for, but a lot of movies come from MGM straight to Prime, and later in the month, the new movie starring Zendaya, Challengers, is going to MGM Plus, which means in another couple of months, it's likely to be on Prime Video. And I've got 2 new releases left on this list. The next one gets released on the 25th, and it's the latest Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning. I gotta say, if you've enjoyed any Mission Impossible ever, this one is just as good as your favorite Mission Impossible movie. These movies really did hit their stride around the 4th and 5th installments. Here we are on the 7th, and honestly, just as good. It's a little overlong, making it kind of hard to rewatch, and this is just part 1 of 2, but they've done such an excellent job with these movies over the years, and even though this one is packed with CGI effects, it's still loaded with a lot of real stunts that are absolutely fantastic. I'll say the big stunt in this movie is far from its most magical moment. There really are some great moments in this movie. I was a particular fan of the Fiat car chase. I just thought that was brilliantly executed. So I'll definitely be checking it out again later in the month, and then they end the month with Lisa Frankenstein.
You know anything about the disappearance of a student? I'm not making any more comments. You can talk to my lawyer.
Really hope this goth phase ends soon.
This is actually the latest film from Diablo Cody, who did Jennifer's Body with Megan Fox, and probably most famous for writing Juno. This is a silly teen comedy oozing an 80s vibe with a lot of horror elements. If that sounds remotely like you, you're in luck. This is going to be a really cool flick here at the end of the month, but let's not forget, on the 1st, they add a ton of stuff. Like I said at the top of the video, I had a hard time deciding what to include, but with it being 4th of July, I gotta mention Saving Private Ryan. Again, all of these are added on July 1st. It goes without saying, this is easily one of the greatest war movies of all time, and certainly one of the greatest World War II movies of all time. It also holds up incredibly well. It looks like it was filmed yesterday. And even though the Normandy landing at the beginning is kind of the most memorable part of the movie, there are so many excellent scenes throughout this thing. I've actually got the itch to watch Lawrence of Arabia after recently watching the new Mad Max movie, Furiosa. It's filmed in a very similar fashion, and even though Lawrence of Arabia has got some years on it, it is still, to this day, easily one of the most visually stunning movies ever made, and there's not a scrap of visual effects in this thing. I could say almost the same thing about Gladiator, even though it does have some visual effects mixed in. Another one that holds up just insanely well, and with a sequel eventually on the way, it could be a good month to watch it. It might also be a good month to rewatch Easy Rider. I did not go to the theater to see The Bike Riders, but I'll likely catch it when it comes available at home, and Easy Rider would likely make a great pairing to that. This is an amazing movie that sort of bridges the gap culturally between the 1960s and 1970s. It came out in 1969, but it was very cutting edge, a lot of drug culture stuff in this movie. In fact, the movie itself was a bit of a game changer. If you consider yourself to be a movie buff in any kind of fashion, you need to see Easy Rider, and it's been a while since I've seen it available on streaming, making this a great month to go ahead and check it out. Spy Game is a movie that's kind of behind its time. I believe it came out in 2001. It stars Robert Redford and Brad Pitt and feels kind of old-fashioned. The way it was filmed looked cutting edge for the time, but it's kind of an old man movie and an old man story, but I do like it. You see kind of a passing of the guard with Robert Redford to Brad Pitt. If you like spy movies and never saw this, Jim, it depicts what real spycraft is most likely like. They're also adding one of my favorite drug movies of all time. I mean, honestly, maybe my absolute favorite drug movie of all time, Trainspotting.
Mr. Murphy, what exactly attracts you to the leisure industry?
In a word, pleasure. It's like my pleasure and other people's leisure.
Another one I have not seen available on streaming in quite some time. This is from director Danny Boyle, who would go on to do amazing movies like Sunshine, 28 Days Later, but Trainspotting was one of his earlier movies and is still a masterpiece of filmmaking. It's got an incredible soundtrack integrated into it. You almost travel through time with the soundtrack on this movie, and then some of the effects that they created to heightened the sense of being on these different drugs is wild. I mean, visually, it's just an amazing movie from beginning to end. It definitely goes to some dark places, but also has a lot of happy moments in it as well. My Left Foot is another one I've not seen on streaming in quite some time. Now, this is a movie I don't actually enjoy. It can actually be a bit of a bear to watch, but it features one of Daniel Day-Lewis's greatest performances of all time. This is the true story of a man born with cerebral palsy who can only move his left foot, and he learns to write with that foot. It's actually a really inspiring story, and Daniel Day-Lewis looks like someone with a disability in this movie in a way that I've never seen in any other film ever made. Again, I don't enjoy watching this movie, but his performance is something to behold. For a classic comedy, they're adding Dr. Strangelove from Stanley Kubrick, an insanely hilarious movie that is like, it's spooky how funny this movie still is today and how relevant a lot of the political humor is today. Like, we're way out from that era, and some of this stuff is insanely relevant today. Again, spooky stuff.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
For some more classic comedies, they're adding Animal House.
I'm a zit. Get it?
Billy Madison.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
They've also got Howard Stern's Private Parts.
WNBC. In my mind, I'm hearing, it sounds like I'm saying exactly what you're saying.
No.
And the original Ted.
Turkey burgers.
Oh, turkey burgers. Are we having homosexuals over for dinner tonight?
For some creepy movies, they're adding David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Not my favorite of his, but I do know there are people who this is their favorite David Lynch movie. It's also kind of one of his more straightforward movies as well, which somehow makes it weirder. It also features Dennis Hopper in one of his most bizarrely savage roles. In fact, him in this and Easy Rider would make a wild double feature in July. We've also got a bedridden Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie in The Bone Collector, as well as Original Sin, starring Angelina Jolie and Antonio Banderas, easily one of her hottest movies ever. Speaking of spicy movies, Savages is another drug dealer movie with kind of an incredible cast, and Blake Lively is an absolute smoke show in this thing. Selma Hayek is always a smoke show, but she actually plays a villain in this and does an amazing job. She chews up the scenery, she overdoes it just a little bit, but it's perfect the way she does it. And I love John Travolta in this movie. I have not liked him in many things in the past 10 to maybe 20 years. This one's an exception. I really enjoyed what he did with the role. They've also got Stephen King's Thinner, a highly overlooked Stephen King flick. This one revolves around a gypsy curse that causes an overweight man to just completely shed all of his weight. There are some effects that are pretty dated in this movie, but it's still kind of a wild gypsy curse Stephen King flick. In a similar vein, they're adding Sweeney Todd. Yes, this one is a musical, but I think it'll appeal to non-musical loving fans. It goes into some dark directions, and it's Tim Burton really kind of at his best. Not saying it's the best Tim Burton movie, but it looks and feels like Tim Burton in a way only a Tim Burton movie can. Same goes for Sleepy Hollow. I don't love this adaptation, but it does have a lot of cool elements. Johnny Depp is great, and Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman is pretty killer as well. Now, I'm trying to wrap this up. I told you I couldn't decide what to talk about. They're adding so much more. They're adding Rocky 1 through 5, a great time to watch those 4th of July weekend. They're some of the most patriotic movies of all time, especially Rocky 4. They're also adding a massive Star Trek collection of, Star Trek movies. And they're adding a bunch of really great westerns, some of the best ever made, including Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. I say with Clint Eastwood, he directed it as well. It's one of his greatest films of all time.
Get 3 coffins ready.
They've also got the Dollars or Man with No Name trilogy, which ends with The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, the one most people are familiar with. They've also got the most recent Magnificent Seven update, also starring Denzel Washington. It's alright, I don't love it, but it's an okay modern western. They also have Shane. If you didn't know, the movie Logan is almost directly based off of this. They're also adding No Country for Old Men, a modern-day Western if there ever was one. And speaking of old men like myself, I'd like to thank Keeps for sponsoring another video. And that's because male pattern baldness is a genetic condition that affects 2 out of every 3 men by the time they're age 35. But you can get professional care for hair loss from the comfort of your own home without ever visiting a doctor or a pharmacy. And it's incredibly easy. After answering just a few basic questions, Keeps is going to pair you with a care provider that's going to tailor a plan specifically for your needs. Keeps provides both of the FDA-approved treatments for hair loss, plus a third option that combines both treatments. And these are treatments that are clinically proven to work, whether you're looking to stimulate hair growth, prevent hair loss, or just take better care of the hair you have. I use their hair thickening shampoo and conditioner regularly, and my hair feels healthier and stronger immediately after use. I love it. Most Keeps men see results within about 6 months of starting their treatment plan. Hair loss stops with Keeps, so for a special offer, go to keeps.com/flickconnection. You can go to the link in the description or use this QR code, but again, that's keeps.com/flickconnection. And don't worry if you want to keep Keeps a secret. They send it directly to your door in discreet, non-branded packaging. So again, to get that deal, go to keeps.com/flickconnection. That's keeps.com/flickconnection. But I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Prime episode, and you will see me on the next one.